Rhea Mallory was washing rice when the phone rang. One of those slow, melancholy rings that don't sound urgent but still scrape at the nerves. She let it ring twice, then 3 times, then 4, already feeling the shape of the conversation forming like fog behind her. Nobody called her landline anymore. Nobody except the people she avoided. She wiped her hands on a towel, inhaled, and answered. Rhea? The voice was soft, strained, unsure. It took Rhea a second to place it. Lydia? Lydia Torre wasn't family. Not by blood, anyway. She had been her mother's closest friend for 3 decades. The kind who showed up with casseroles after deaths, with champagne after graduations, with silence after scandals. For most of Rhea's childhood, Lydia's voice had been the soundtrack of the house. Laughing with her mother, whispering with her father. Always present, but never fully part of the picture. But Lydia hadn't called in years. Not since the final rupture. Rhea? Lydia repeated. They want to see you. They want to make things right. There it was. The fog became thunder. Rhea gripped the counter, feeling cold tile under her fingers. She didn't speak. Lydia filled the quiet. They've realized some things, she said. They know they mishandled the situation. Both of them. They know what happened with— Stop. Rhea's voice surprised them both. Years ago, she would have whispered. She would have begged. She would have tried to contort herself into something palatable for her parents. But now, she was steel. Not sharp, not violent, just unbendable. Rhea, please. They're trying. They weren't trying, Rhea said, when they sold my belongings without asking. They weren't trying when they filed a fraudulent complaint at my workplace. They weren't trying when they trashed my reputation in the neighborhood. They weren't trying when they dragged Marcel into it. A tremor passed through Lydia's breathing. They regret all that. They regret the consequences, Rhea corrected. Silence. The kind that sits heavy, like an animal sleeping on your chest. Rhea closed her eyes. The kitchen was warm, honey-colored, peaceful. The windows were open, letting in the scent of rosemary and the sound of kids playing down the street. This was a home she built herself, dollar by dollar, hour by hour, tear by silent tear, a home her parents never stepped foot in. A home they once mocked for being too small, too modest, too far from the city, too beneath a Mallory. But it was hers, and peace lived here. Tell me what they want, Rhea said. They want to apologize, Lydia said carefully. They want to meet. They want to explain. They've had 6 years to explain. I know. And they had decades before that to treat me like a daughter. I know. Rhea exhaled through her nose, slow and measured. But Lydia wasn't done. They're scared, Rhea. Of what? Of losing you forever. Rhea let that hang there, tasting its weight. Finally, she said the one thing she'd never dared say. They already did. Before the final break, before the police report, before the confrontation that left the whole neighborhood whispering, Rhea had been the dutiful daughter, the one who held everything together, the one who paid the heating bill when her parents forgot, the one who showed up at hospitals, PTA meetings, tax appointments, the one who cleaned messes, literal and emotional, the one who stood between her younger sister Talia and their father's temper, the one who never asked for anything. Rhea grew up in a house that looked perfect from the outside. White shutters, blue door, tulips in spring. But inside it was brittle, like a glass house humming with cracks. Her mother, Celeste Mallory, mastered the art of conditional affection. Praise came only when Rhea performed. High grades, winning competitions, maintaining the image. Love was a currency, and Celeste controlled the vault. Her father, Tobias Mallory, was quieter but sharper. He didn't yell, he sliced. With comments, with silence, with little bits of shame dropped like seeds. You're too sensitive. You imagine slights. Don't be dramatic. You owe us. After everything we've done for you, everything was subtle. Nothing was obvious. And so Rhea spent her childhood wondering whether pain had to be loud to count as pain. Talia, the younger sister, never felt the same pressure. Celeste adored her, openly, unconditionally, dazzlingly. Talia was the golden child, the sun around which the whole family orbited. Rhea didn't mind. She loved her sister. She protected her. She shielded her from the small cruelties. But love, when unbalanced, ferments. As teenagers, the distance grew. Talia leaned into the praise. Rhea leaned into invisibility. And when Rhea finally moved out at 21, into a cramped attic apartment that smelled faintly of old books and new dreams, Her parents acted like she had committed a betrayal. "You're abandoning your family," Celeste had said. "We needed you here," Tobias murmured. "After everything we've done for you," Talia added. And that line, "everything we've done for you," would repeat for the next decade, a mantra, a leash. Even after Rhea paid off a loan they took out in her name. Even after she covered Talia's semester fees when her parents refused. Even after she cleaned up one scandal after another. It was never enough. She was never enough. Until she met Marcel. Quiet, steady, patient Marcel. A man who didn't take, didn't demand, didn't judge. A man her family would later weaponize. It happened like this. One evening, Rhea received a frantic call from her neighbor. "Are you home?" "No. You need to get here now." By the time she arrived at her rented townhouse on Willow Road, the police were already there. Her parents were standing outside. Her sister was crying. Shards of glass glittered on the porch like confetti from a nightmare. "What happened?" Rhea whispered. Her father faced her, eyes cold but jittery. "We thought he was hurting you." "Who?" "That man you live with. What's his name? Mason? Marius?" "Marcel," she snapped. "His name is Marcel." Celeste stepped forward, hands trembling but dramatic. "We were trying to protect you." "By breaking into my house?" "It wasn't your house," Tobias said. "The neighbors let us in." "They didn't," the neighbor corrected quietly. "You forced the door." And then Rhea saw it. The dent in the wall, the smashed vase, the shattered picture frame that held a photo of her and Marcel at the beach last summer. It hit her like an ocean wave. "You didn't come to check on me," she said slowly. "You came to destroy something." Celeste's face faltered. Tobias looked away. Talia sobbed. Marcel put his hand on Rhea's shoulder, steadying her. And it was in that moment, hearing the tremor of the police radio, smelling the dust and drywall, seeing the broken home she worked so hard to build, that Rhea finally understood. They weren't protecting her. They were punishing her for moving out, punishing her for choosing peace, punishing her for choosing someone who wasn't them. They wanted chaos because they couldn't stand that she'd found calm. And that night, something inside her cracked, not loudly, but cleanly, like a thread giving way. Rhea didn't cut them off immediately. She should have. Anyone would have. But trauma teaches loyalty too well. It took 6 years. 6 years of boundaries they ignored. 6 years of apologies that weren't apologies. 6 years of them trying to wedge themselves back into her life through guilt, manipulation, or theatrics. Meanwhile, she rebuilt. A small design studio of her own. Weekend trips with Marcel. A life filled with choices she made for herself. Every step forward felt like a rebellion. And yet her parents remained the ghostly gravity she fought against. Until one day, Rhea simply stopped fighting. Stopped explaining. Stopped justifying. She went silent. And silence, to toxic people, is violence. Back in the present, Lydia waited. "Rhea," she said softly, "I know they've hurt you, but they're your parents." "No," Rhea said. "They're people who raised me." Another silence. Then Rhea gave the only message she was willing to send. "Tell my mother I hope she finds peace. Tell my father I hope he learns accountability. Tell Talia I hope she gets the help she needs. But I'm done." Lydia inhaled sharply. "You don't mean that." "I do. They're devastated." "They should be," Rhea said simply. "But forgiveness heals," Lydia tried. "I've already forgiven them," Rhea said. "But forgiveness doesn't mean access." Lydia didn't speak again. Just whispered, "I'll tell them," and hung up. Rhea stared at the receiver for a long moment before placing it back. The kitchen felt warmer, lighter, like someone had opened a window she didn't realize was stuck shut. She picked up the towel, finished washing the rice, and set it in the pot. When she turned, she saw Marcel leaning against the doorway. "You okay?" he asked. Rhea walked to him, pressed her forehead against his chest, and whispered, "I am now." That night she and Marcel made dinner together. Chopping onions, sautéing garlic, letting the television hum in the background. As they ate, Rhea felt something she couldn't name at first, a looseness in her chest. A widening, a quiet relief. It wasn't happiness. It was oxygen. She looked around the small dining room, painted soft green, with shelves full of plants and books and framed art from local markets. None of it expensive, none of it luxurious, but all of it hers. She used to think family was blood. Now she knew better. Family is who shows up. Family is who listens. Family is who protects your heart, not preys on it. Marcel reached for her hand. "Whatever comes next," he said. "We handle it together." She nodded, and in that moment it wasn't a promise. It was a truth. "You don't mean that." "I do." "They're devastated." "They should be," Rhea said simply. "But forgiveness heals," Lydia tried. "I've already forgiven them," Rhea said. "But forgiveness doesn't mean access." Lydia didn't speak again. Just whispered, "I'll tell them," and hung up. Rhea stared at the receiver for a long moment before placing it back. The kitchen felt warmer, lighter, like someone had opened a window she didn't realize was stuck shut. She picked up the towel, finished washing the rice, and set it in the pot. When she turned, she saw Marcel leaning against the doorway. "You okay?" he asked. Rhea walked to him, pressed her forehead against his chest, and whispered, "I am now." That night she and Marcel made dinner together. Chopping onions, sautéing garlic, letting the television hum in the background. They talked about buying land near the coast, a house with wide windows and lemon trees, a porch where they could drink tea in the mornings, a life rooted in respect, stability, and actual love. As they ate, Rhea felt something she couldn't name at first, a looseness in her chest. A widening, a quiet relief. It wasn't happiness. It was oxygen. She looked around the small dining room, painted soft green, with shelves full of plants and books and framed art from local markets. None of it expensive, none of it luxurious, but all of it hers. She used to think family was blood. Now she knew better. Family is who shows up. Family is who listens. Family is who protects your heart, not preys on it. Marcel reached for her hand. "Whatever comes next," he said. "We handle it together." She nodded, and in that moment it wasn't a promise. It was a truth. 3 months had passed since. The night everything finally snapped into clarity. That night, when my parents swung a baseball bat into a stranger's living room, believing it was mine, left a crack running through the last thread. I still felt obligated to protect, but what I didn't expect was how wide that crack would eventually stretch. I thought the story would end with me walking away. It didn't. Sometimes peace doesn't come from choosing quiet. Sometimes it comes from choosing yourself so fiercely that nothing, not even the ghost of who raised you, can pull you back. That was the part I hadn't learned yet. It was early on a Wednesday, mist hanging over the rooftops of Harborview like a silk veil, the kind of morning that looks soft even before you step outside. I stood barefoot in the kitchen of the apartment I shared with Rowan. Yes, the same Rowan who once said she didn't see the point of people, who owned more than 3 mugs and a bed. She was stirring honey into her coffee, the sunlight catching the freckles on her cheek. She looked up at me. "You didn't sleep much," she said. "I slept," I lied. "You stared at the ceiling until 2. I heard you turn pages." Caught. She always heard more than she let on. I picked up the mug she handed me and wrapped both hands around it. The warmth sank into my palms, grounding. "It's the hearings," I said finally. Rowan nodded, lips pressed. She didn't have to ask which hearings. The ones related to the incident with my parents. The property damage, the misunderstanding they kept insisting wasn't their fault. The neighbor who had pressed charges until he learned I wasn't the one who destroyed his furniture. I thought I'd feel nothing by now. I thought distance meant immunity. But grief has a way of returning when the world gets quiet. Rowan reached out, brushed a strand of hair behind my ear. Something motherly and tender. "You're going to get through today just fine." I didn't doubt that. I just doubted how much of myself would be left afterward. When I stepped outside to leave for work, a white envelope was sitting on the doormat. No stamp, no return address, just my name written in looping handwriting. I hadn't seen since I was 22. Not my mother's handwriting, not my father's either. Aria's. My older cousin, the one person in my family who'd ever treated me with something resembling affection, even if she always stayed quiet when things got ugly. She lived 3 hours away, now, and had a life filled with art galleries and spoken word, evenings and people who drank, herb-infused cocktails on terraces with string lights. I slipped the letter into my bag without opening it. At work, the envelope felt radioactive. Every document I read, every email I answered, every meeting I pretended to care about. My mind circled back to the white paper burning a hole in my purse. At lunch, I finally gave in. The letter wasn't long. Aria never wasted words. My throat tightened. This was what real accountability looked like. Not grand apologies dripping in guilt. Not desperate attempts to clean a conscience. Just truth. I folded the letter and slipped it into the inner pocket of my bag. I didn't know what to do with it yet. But something inside me had shifted. like a latch unhooking. The municipal office was cold, colder than the weather, colder than the season, the kind of cold that lived in concrete walls and government linoleum. I sat on a wooden bench outside courtroom 7B, hands clasped tightly in my lap. The door cracked open. My name was called. Inside, I expected anger to rise in me, or shame, or maybe a leftover sliver of loyalty. But what I felt instead was distance, wide, echoing distance. My parents sat at the table opposite mine. They looked smaller than I remembered. My mother's hair, once meticulously dyed, had streaks of gray. My father kept rubbing his hands together nervously. They didn't look like tyrants. They looked like people who had made a catastrophe of their own choices. The neighbor whose living room they destroyed wasn't there. He'd chosen restorative mediation instead of pressing severe charges. The judge reviewed the incident, the damage, the circumstances. My parents had already been fined. They'd already undergone anger management classes. Today was mostly procedural. But then the judge asked the question I dreaded. Would the victim like to make a statement? Victim. The word landed strangely. I'd never allowed myself to wear that label. Not in childhood, not in adulthood. I rose. My parents looked at me with something almost hopeful. I ignored the part of my chest that twisted. My parents didn't hurt me physically, I said, voice steady. They hurt someone else while trying to hurt me emotionally. And that has been the pattern of my entire life.